what airlines expect older travelers to just deal with. There's a quiet moment that happens to a lot of travelers over 55, and it doesn't come with an announcement. It shows up when a gate changes with no warning, and the new gate is a 10-minute walk away. It shows up when boarding starts early, but pre-boarding feels awkward to request. It shows up when a connection looks reasonable on paper, but leaves no room for a slower pace, a restroom stop, or a short breather. Nothing dramatic happens, no rule is broken. And yet the message is clear: the system expects you to keep up. That expectation didn't come from nowhere. Modern air travel is built around speed, density, and self-service. The problem is that those design choices quietly assume a passenger body that's younger, faster, and more digitally fluent than a lot of real people actually are. If you're 55 or older, you're often asked to absorb those assumptions without complaint, and without much explanation. Welcome to Passport Pointers, where we break down what airlines design into the experience, but rarely say out loud, especially when it comes to what older travelers are expected to just deal with. The assumption that you can walk farther than you used to. Air travel operates on the quiet belief that your legs are exactly the same as they were a decade ago, and airports design everything around that fantasy. Gates drift farther apart every year, security somehow migrates deeper into the building, and the phrase, "just a short walk," now covers distances that would have required a map in the past. If you're over 55, the issue isn't walking itself. It's cumulative walking. Hard floors, rolling bags that don't roll straight, and crowds that stop without warning turn a simple walk into a slow endurance test. You may walk perfectly fine at home, but airports don't allow pauses, benches, or dignity at predictable intervals. The real trap is expectation. You don't realize how much ground you've covered until your energy is already gone. By the time you reach the gate, you're not tired from travel, you're tired from being underestimated by the system. Everything afterward feels heavier. Boarding, lifting bags, settling into a seat that suddenly seems much lower than you remember. Connections make it worse. Airline schedules assume a brisk pace, no bathroom stops, and knees that don't negotiate. Miss that pace by a few minutes and the entire trip turns into a stress drill disguised as logistics. This isn't about giving up mobility. It's about recognizing that modern airports quietly demand more walking than they admit. Planning with that reality in mind doesn't limit travel. It preserves it, by ensuring the journey doesn't exhaust you before the destination even has a chance. The shift to app-first communication. Airlines now rely heavily on apps for gate changes, delays, rebookings, and even customer service. For travelers who didn't grow up managing everything through a smartphone, this creates a quiet disadvantage. It's not that older travelers can't use apps, it's that the system assumes constant checking, fast tapping, and comfort with digital problem-solving under pressure. If you miss a push notification or struggle to navigate an app mid-disruption, you're suddenly behind. Airlines rarely provide parallel, equally fast human communication anymore. The expectation is that you're watching your phone, and if you're not, that's on you. If you're 55 or older, what part of flying has become more tiring than it used to be? Long walks, boarding stress, seat comfort, or keeping up with digital changes? Drop it in the comments. We read them, and it helps shape what we cover next. The expectation that you can lift and stow bags easily. Air travel still operates on the expectation that lifting and stowing a bag overhead is a basic skill everyone retains forever. Over time, shoulders stiffen, grip strength changes, and balance becomes less forgiving, yet the overhead bin remains at the same height, waiting patiently for you to prove otherwise. At home, lifting is controlled. You choose the angle, the weight, and the timing. On a plane, you lift while standing in a narrow aisle, twisting your torso, reaching above eye level, and hoping the bin doesn't fight back. Meanwhile, gravity is doing what it does best, and the person behind you is pretending not to notice how long it's taking. Airlines quietly normalize this struggle by calling carry-ons light and bins easy to use. Neither is consistently true. Bags are heavier than they look, bins open at awkward angles, and turbulence from boarding passengers bumps your elbows at exactly the wrong moment. The risk isn't embarrassment, it's strain, loss of balance, or dropping something you now have to retrieve from the floor. What makes this expectation especially unfair is that help is technically available but socially discouraged. Asking for assistance feels like admitting failure, even though it prevents injury and speeds things up. Most injuries during boarding don't come from walking. They come from lifting while rushed. The smarter approach isn't forcing independence. It's recognizing that overhead storage was designed for efficiency, not ergonomics. Letting go of the idea that you must lift and stow bags alone doesn't reduce your capability. It protects it, so the rest of the trip doesn't start with pain disguised as pride. Social pressure to not be difficult. Perhaps the most subtle expectation is emotional. Older travelers often feel pressure not to slow things down, not to ask for help, and not to be seen as difficult. That pressure is reinforced by rushed environments, tight schedules, and impatient crowds. So many people over 55 push themselves harder than they should, walking faster, lifting more, sitting longer, because they don't want to stand out. Airlines don't create that pressure directly, but they benefit from it. The quieter you are, the smoother the system runs. Seat designs that ignore aging bodies. Airline seats are engineered for an imaginary passenger who never stiffens, never swells, and can fold themselves into a narrow space without negotiating with their joints. For aging bodies, that fantasy shows up immediately. Cushions are thin, lumbar support is decorative, and armrests seem designed to remind you exactly where your hips no longer want pressure. Seat pitch has shrunk over the years, even as passengers have not. Knees sit closer to the seat ahead, circulation slows, and staying still becomes harder than moving. The problem isn't comfort in the luxury sense, it's basic biomechanics. Bodies that have logged decades of use need room to shift, adjust, and redistribute weight. Airline seats assume you won't. Then there's the angle. Seats recline just enough to annoy the person behind you, but not enough to relieve pressure on your lower back. Headrests push your chin forward. Seat bottoms slope in ways that quietly compress nerves. After an hour, you're not uncomfortable because you're picky. You're uncomfortable because the design ignores how aging spines actually rest. Getting in and out makes it obvious. Seats sit low, requiring a controlled drop and an even more controlled stand. Add turbulence, a full cabin, and the need to exit quickly, and what should be routine turns into choreography. The industry treats these issues as personal tolerance problems instead of design failures. But aging bodies aren't exceptions. They're the rule for a growing share of passengers. Until seats acknowledge that reality, discomfort will continue to be framed as weakness when it's really just physics being ignored at 35,000 feet. Reduced access to in-person help. Customer service desks have shrunk. Phone lines are long. Chat support loops endlessly. For older travelers who prefer or need human assistance, especially during disruptions, getting help can feel like navigating another obstacle course. Airlines expect passengers to self-solve first and escalate later. If self-solving isn't your strength, delays compound stress quickly. The system assumes digital fluency equals independence. The assumption that you can stand and wait indefinitely. Air travel is built on the strange belief that once you enter an airport, your ability to stand becomes unlimited. Time stretches, gravity intensifies, and somehow you're expected to wait calmly on concrete floors that feel engineered to drain patience through the soles of your shoes. For aging bodies, the issue isn't standing. It's standing still, indefinitely, with no end in sight and no chair in reach. Lines are where this expectation really flexes its muscle. Check-in lines creep forward without explanation. Security lines pause just long enough for your legs to remind you they exist. Boarding lines form early, even though boarding will not begin early, and everyone stands anyway because sitting feels risky, like you might miss something important by resting for 30 seconds. Standing still is harder than walking, especially as joints stiffen and circulation slows. Airports ignore that reality completely. There are handrails designed not to be leaned on, walls shaped to discourage resting, and benches placed just far enough away to be useless. If you step out of line to sit, you sacrifice your place so you stay upright and negotiate with your knees instead. Delays make the situation absurd, seats disappear, crowds thicken, and the terminal turns into a low-stakes endurance test no one signed up for. You're not tired because of travel. You're tired because the system treats waiting as a passive act when it's physically demanding. This assumption isn't personal, but the discomfort feels personal. Recognizing that standing tolerance changes over time isn't weakness. It's reality. Airports just haven't caught up to it yet. Tight connections that leave no recovery time. Airline schedules love tight connections because they look efficient on paper, even if they're brutal on real people. The expectation is that you'll step off one plane and immediately transform into a fast-moving, fully recovered version of yourself, regardless of how long you've been sitting, how stiff your joints feel, or how far the next gate actually is. For passengers over 55, the missing element isn't speed, it's recovery time. Standing up after a flight takes a moment. Blood has to move again. Knees need a few steps to remember how they work. Tight connections assume none of that applies. You're expected to stand, walk quickly, change terminals, and board again as if the previous flight never happened. What makes this worse is that the first flight rarely goes exactly as planned. A slight delay erases your buffer. Suddenly you're walking faster than is comfortable, scanning signs while pulling a bag that feels heavier than it did an hour ago. There's no pause built into the system for a restroom stop, a drink of water, or even a deep breath. When you do make it, you arrive already drained. Boarding the next flight feels harder. Lifting bags feels riskier. Sitting down feels like relief instead of routine. And if you miss the connection, the recovery you needed turns into hours of waiting instead. Tight connections don't just save time, they steal margin. For aging bodies, margin matters. Without it, travel stops feeling streamlined and starts feeling like a test you didn't train for. The quiet burden of managing medical needs. Many travelers over 55 manage medications, medical devices, or health routines while flying. Airlines allow necessary medical items and mobility aids, but they don't design the experience around managing them easily. Security screening, repacking, hydration limits, and long periods of sitting all complicate medical routines. The expectation is that you'll adapt quietly and efficiently. If you need more time, more space, or more explanation, that request often feels like an interruption, even though it's completely reasonable. The idea that pre-boarding is optional, not necessary. Pre-boarding is often framed as a courtesy, something you take if you feel like it, not something you actually need. For many airline passengers over 55, that framing is polite fiction. Airports move fast, aisles are narrow, and boarding is one of the most physically demanding parts of the entire trip. Even though it's treated like a formality, when you board with the main groups, you're stepping into a crowded aisle where people stop suddenly, bags swing at knee level, and overhead bins fill at a pace that feels personal. Standing still while holding your balance, lifting a carry-on above shoulder height, and doing all of it while someone behind you sighs loudly is not a neutral experience. It's a strain, even if you're otherwise healthy. Pre-boarding isn't about getting special treatment. It's about controlling the environment for a few minutes. Fewer people in the aisle means less standing, less rushing, and less pressure to move faster than your body wants to. It gives you time to stow your bag without twisting, to sit without dropping into the seat, and to settle before the plane turns into a moving puzzle of elbows and impatience. Many travelers skip pre-boarding because they don't want to look like they need it. The irony is that the system already assumes you don't. Pre-boarding simply corrects that assumption. It doesn't slow the flight down. It prevents unnecessary stress before you've even buckled in. And that small shift often determines whether the rest of the journey feels manageable or quietly exhausting. Why this isn't about entitlement. Pointing this out isn't about demanding special treatment. It's about acknowledging that a system designed for speed will always disadvantage people whose bodies or habits have changed. Aging isn't a malfunction, it's a normal part of life. But air travel is designed as if normal never changes. Once you recognize that, frustration becomes strategy. How older travelers can adapt without apologizing. The most powerful shift is internal. Stop treating your needs as inconveniences. Extra time, pre-boarding, aisle seats, longer connections, and lighter bags aren't indulgences. They're tools. Request assistance early. Choose flights that give you margin. Sit when you can. Move deliberately. Let others rush. Design your trip around how your body works now, not how it worked 20 years ago. Why airlines are unlikely to change soon. Airlines are unlikely to change anytime soon, not because they don't hear complaints, but because the system works exactly as designed for the people who designed it. Efficiency, throughput, and profit scale beautifully. Comfort, recovery, and aging bodies do not. From the airline's perspective, the model is doing its job as long as planes leave on time and seats stay full. Most airline decisions are driven by averages, not realities. The average passenger walks briskly, lifts easily, stands patiently, and recovers instantly. That passenger doesn't exist, but spreadsheets love them. Designing for averages allows airlines to move more people with fewer resources, even if it quietly wears passengers down in the process. There's also the issue of visibility. Discomfort doesn't show up on balance sheets. Fatigue, joint pain, and stress aren't tracked metrics. As long as passengers keep booking flights, the assumption is that the experience is acceptable. Complaints are treated as individual tolerance issues, not signals of a system misaligned with a growing older population. Changing aircraft interiors, boarding processes, or scheduling models is expensive and slow. Airlines operate on thin margins and long equipment life cycles. Seats stay in service for years. Policies get standardized across fleets. Any change that adds time or space is viewed as a threat to efficiency, even if it improves passenger well-being. The reality is that aging travelers are adapting faster than airlines are. Until comfort and recovery are treated as operational necessities instead of personal preferences, the burden will remain on passengers to adjust, plan defensively, and manage expectations in a system that isn't built to slow down. The real advantage is permission. The biggest advantage older travelers can give themselves is permission. Permission to slow down, to ask for help, to choose comfort over speed, and to ignore the unspoken expectation to keep up at all costs. You don't need to justify your pace, you just need to plan for it. If this breakdown resonated with you, click here for my Senior Travel Hacks playlist. Smarter, easier trips after 60. Watch the next Passport Pointers video for a deeper look at how small design choices in air travel quietly shape your entire experience. Thanks for watching Passport Pointers, and I'll see you in the next video.